Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 341 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about virtual travel. First, let me pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today. When we started to hear about the concept of virtual travel, I must confess, at first I assumed that it would just be kind of a poor replacement for real travel. Then the pandemic hit and I got to experience a bit of it for myself. I had, for example, a virtual tour of Elephant Nature Park in Thailand, which was amazing. And then most memorably, actually, I had a virtual tour through a small village in Western China where I got to virtually meet some artisans, but it was live. I could ask questions through the translator and kind of see the sights. And of course, they were largely empty of people, but you could see, a good description of the buildings, a temple, all sorts of stuff that in a place I would never otherwise probably have imagined going, and it really got me, much more interested in China, and it was also heaps of fun, even though I wasn't there. I have also taken some of my high school students on virtual tours with VR headsets. For one group in particular, I remember there were a bunch of kids who'd left mainstream high school because they'd really struggled there for different reasons, and most of them didn't really have the confidence to imagine ever really travelling anywhere, but they're like 15, 16. I wanted them to feel like maybe one day they could, and using these VR headsets, they actually got this kind of almost real feeling of being in they chose the places. It was mostly London and Paris, and they could walk up to the ticket booth at the Eiffel Tower, and I could see it was really thrilling for them. So anyway, suffice to say, I am much more open to the concept of virtual travel these days. And in this episode, I speak with three guests who are involved in a variety of different kinds of virtual travel, all interesting, and I have to say, all with something genuine to offer to the thoughtful traveller as well. It's not just about the tech. My first guest is Chiara Barbera. She's Australian of Italian ancestry, and Chiara wanted to share the Italian culture that she'd grown up with and started a virtual experience with the help of her Italian grandparents and their friends.
It's called Assaggio, which means taste in Italian, and it basically offers a taste of Italy through beautiful online experiences with the aim to kind of celebrate nonni, which are Italian grandparents, and save Italian traditions. So basically, it is a virtual space where you can join us at the Assaggio Traditions table. So it's essentially like a virtual table that have all of our featured nonni around this table that kind of share their recipes, their gardening tips, and also pastimes. So we've got some Italian card games. We've got some interviews with some really interesting grandparents that have done amazing things in the Italian community in Australia. And also we've got a special little segment called Coffee with Nonna. So basically it's just a chat that I have with my grandmothers and they talk about their stories because they're both obviously migrated from Italy. So one of my nonnas was a proxy bride. So she was married by proxy, which means someone kind of steps into the wedding. So it was her father-in-law that was like the representative. So she never actually met her husband until she arrived in Australia. So that's a very interesting story. And then, amazing. Yes. And then my other nonna, she had a bit of a less traumatic experience. My grandfather fell in love with her in a small little town in Sicily. Basically, like went to visit her every day. Her mum originally said no, and then he went to visit her every single day, and then they got married. So she actually met him first. But essentially talking about the virtual travel, it's all about being able to kind of immerse yourself into the Italian culture without even having to leave your home. And we've crafted these videos, which is basically like a step-by-step. My whole thing is like, I want you to feel like you press play and you can kind of cook alongside or learn alongside the nonno, which is grandfather, or nonna, grandmother, as you go. And it's my way of basically sharing that love and passion and warmth that I feel with all grandparents. And then we've also got like a bit of a curated playlist for people to really drift away to the sounds of Italy and some tips to get the most from your experience. So it's really kind of that virtual travel, kind of like all-encompassing, really like it's an experience.
It sounds amazing. I just love this idea. And I know that from the Italian friends I have, that the culture and the cooking and all of this stuff that gets passed on from their grandparents is intense and special.
Yes.
So I can just imagine this virtual world you've created. I'm very curious about, so I assume the first people you approached were your own grandparents.
Yes.
Were they keen to be involved? Did they understand what you were doing? How did that all work out?
Amanda, so funny. So yeah, I was very blessed because all of my grandparents are Italian. Unfortunately, I lost my grandfathers when I was quite young, but I'm very close with my grandmothers. And so I obviously pitched the idea to them first. Actually, there's a couple of experiences that I totally recommend people should try. So the first one is called caponata. And basically I call it like a vegetable medley. It's a traditional Sicilian recipe that you make with capsicum and eggplant.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really good. And it's so simple as well. So that was one of the first videos that we did. It was so funny. So my nonna is like, she's so speedy. She has 3 boys and she had my grandfather who wanted to have like a home cooked lunch and dinner every single day. So she was just like always in the kitchen. So she became very quick. And so every time we filmed, it was like a full on battle because I would be like, don't do anything until I've set everything up and then you can start. Because I was like, if you start, people won't know what you've done. And the whole idea is they cook along with you. So, and one person's done her meatballs and sauce. And she was like, we kind of like lost it because she was so quick. So we just ended up throwing everything in. And we were like, we'll try again next time. And I was like, I get it. But it's fun because, you follow along with. So yeah, that was kind of like the biggest battle with her, was like just getting her to wait for me. I'm like, hang on a second. Like, let's start. But it's really cute because during that video, I think it really represents exactly like whether they were interested or not. Because I think she just saw like the cameras all set up. And at one point she goes, so can you see me? And I was like, yeah. And I was like, go on, go around the camera and have a look. I've left this into the video because I was like, I had to keep it in. It was too cute. And so she walks around and you hear her going, oh yeah, you can see me. And it was so sweet because she got all excited. So she was keen. I think with me, because we have that beautiful relationship, they were kind of like, we'll just do whatever keeps you happy. So she was happy to do that. So I'm very blessed in that sense. On the other hand, I have an adopted non or grandfather who is my great uncle. And I'm very blessed. I do have quite a beautiful community of grandparents around me. So I tapped into all of them. I said to him, we do, basically when you go to the traditions table, you'll see little videos of everyone that they introduce themselves. So you can kind of learn a little bit about the grandfather or grandmother and their story. And it's just like a quick little video, a little intro. He's the king of Sicilian sausages. So he migrated to Brisbane. He loves making his Sicilian sausages. Basically, it's like a pork sausage with fennel. That's kind of the key taste of the Sicilian sausage. And he actually went to a butcher and he was like just chatting to him one day and the butcher was like, will you teach me how to make them? And so he's quite famous because he brought the Sicilian sausage to Brisbane at least. Yeah. So he's pretty amazing. And him with his wife, my great aunt, they do all these traditions. They do everything. So I really admire them. I was like, I need you two to be on the website. And so my auntie said she's gone down to the local supermarket and they're like, oh, we saw you. Like we saw you on Facebook, that you do your recipes. So she was like, oh, she's so modest. She is. So she was like, I was at the butcher or the deli, sorry. And I was getting and they're like, oh, I've seen you. She's like, yes, I know. Assaggio. She's really cute. So her husband, on the other hand, when I said to him, we've got to sit down and we've got to record this video of you, this intro video, he's like, no, I'm not an actor. And I was like, Zeal, you're not acting. You're just telling me about your story. And he was like, oh, no. Anyways, I really had to convince him. So we finally sat down. I was like, I promise, all you need to do is just talk to me. Just forget that the camera's even there. So we were just having a chat and he was really great and he said some amazing things. After that, every single time I went to film at their house, because I would do some with him, some with his wife, he would always, when I was doing it with his wife, come into the camera. He was like, hi, every time. So I was like, for someone who didn't want to be on the camera, you sure love it.
You can probably imagine just from my fun chat there with Chiara that Assaggio is full of fun, and I've had a look at some of the videos, absolutely gorgeous. So highly recommended if you want to have a little virtual taste of Italy. My next guest today is Martha Waslen. She's the founder of DayAway, which is an online platform for booking special daytime experiences in hotels, which she started up in Singapore. And with her work with DayAway and other work as well. She's developed a real keen interest in new technologies, Web 3.0, and, well, all manner of virtual travel ideas.
I've been exploring the Web3 space for a number of years, and there's some elements that are relevant to DayAway in this, budding economy of Web3, metaverse, virtual experience. We've been thinking quite a lot about this, and, obviously it's very relevant in conversations at, travel and hospitality conferences that we've been attending. And it is interesting because I feel like it kind of hits a nerve with a lot of people in the industry. There's a little bit of this fear factor, right, about the prevalence of virtual travel. How will that affect the in real life experience? And, I'm a believer. I'm really excited about the expansion of virtual travel and virtual experience, but I don't believe that we'll ever replace the in real life experience. It's just a way to enhance it, ways to build stronger connections with new audiences of people, a great way to educate people about areas of the world they've never even considered traveling to before. They don't think it's safe. They don't really know what to imagine, and it's a bit too intimidating for them. And I think it has very emotional implications that I'm excited about, just making the world feel easier to understand. I always use this example, like people in middle America that might never ever consider traveling to the Middle East, but now they can more interact with that culture and seeing what it's really like, see really, picturesque views of, desert landscapes and what it might be like walking through some of the old quarters of the city and what that might do in terms of their understanding of the world, right? Like the very first step in showing interest in an area of the world that they never really would have considered before, or they might have preconceived, potentially negative emotions about. So I think that that's really interesting, and where that can all go with education, cultural understanding. And then the other thing that I think is really exciting is really the commercial effect of this. My platform works very closely with hospitality and travel brands that are trying to market to new audiences. And imagine a hotel that's opening a year from now, but they start launching these virtual experiences that really can highlight, showcase what is core to that brand. Is it art? Is it wellness and meditation? Is it fine dining? And imagine that you could launch this virtual experience a year before you even open the doors to your hotel to try and attract and engage new source markets. Like, how cool is that? It's just the evolution of what we saw in print advertising, and then in social media, and then of course in YouTube. Like, nobody can deny that these are very meaningful platforms as prospective guests are planning their trips, right? And even kind of the inception point of why they might want to travel to your hotel or to this city or whatever it might be. So I think once the hospitality industry just kind of becomes a little bit more receptive, starting to see the developments in metaverse technology, let's just say, I think that they'll start to get really excited about it as well, what's possible in terms of driving more meaningful guest engagement, of course, increased revenue opportunities. And then I think what's even more interesting is how you engage with guests, or I think we're going to start seeing guest loyalty programs operating more like communities. How are you engaging with them post-stay? So I know there's been a lot of conversation about, the collection of digital assets when you're staying at the hotel as almost a memento of your stay at that property, or going to that restaurant, that museum, whatever it might be. But I think for the hotels specifically, and for the big loyalty programs, imagine after somebody stayed at one of your hotels, the way that you can engage with them after they've left the property. So for example, if you've traveled to this amazing property in Bali for a meditative retreat or all about wellness, somebody who's now left your hotel could continue to engage with your brand because they like to take this meditative workshop in virtual reality every week. Yeah. That's hosted by your brand. Like, how amazing is that? And then they're turning into a lifetime customer, returning every year for this retreat, or starting to explore other properties within your portfolio that might be launching a similar experience. So I think the virtual element really allows brands to engage with guests and community every day, not just stay to stay when they're looking for a place to put their head when they're traveling. So I'm really excited about it from a business perspective and a personal perspective as well. Like I can't wait for this. Like there are brands that I love that I would love to be like checking in even on like a live feed of what's going on at this hotel.
Yeah.
That I really, I do get a real sense of calm or escape, even just thinking about that memory of being at that property. If there was a way to engage with it with more frequency, I would absolutely take the opportunity. Yeah, I think hotels will really just see this as the evolution of digital advertising.
Oh, this is so wonderful. So I hadn't thought to this depth about this before. So in the terms of the thoughtful travel space, I'm really big on, your trip really extends. It's the before and the after, and you can be thoughtful in those areas as well. It's not just the while you're there. And the kinds of virtual activities that can take place to educate and inspire beforehand. But yeah, like you're saying, the kind of to get that feeling back afterwards as well. We all love to look back on our travel experiences and really, relive them in some ways. But like you say, if you've had an amazing meditation experience somewhere and then you can actually continue that and you're virtually beamed in there, and it's one step ahead of just, being in an online meditation class. But if you've actually been there already and you know what it feels like, what it sounds like and smells like in real life, but then you're taken back there by, being able to log on online, then that's it's really next level, isn't it? So super interesting to hear from Martha, who, really has her finger on the pulse in that space, to hear about some of the ideas that really actually do really gel with my thoughtful travel thoughts, to think about how we can educate and, just get people to think about all kinds of parts of the world. They don't have to go there to have those thoughts. Interesting stuff. My final guest today is Chris Magnuson. And Chris is a teacher, and he also loves playing around in Google Street View. And he was doing that once, seeing what he could find. And one day he just randomly dropped himself into a random town in Iowa and found some interesting statues, wondered what they were, looked around on Street View, found a phone number of the place across the road to ring up and ask. And long story short, he got to know a local cafe owner as a consequence. So this gave him the idea for some broader virtual travel, including a game show. And he tells us a bit about this in this chat.
It started this journey of exploring the world virtually and then figuring out, how do I connect with the world in reality, but still distant. So it's I'm trying to figure out who are the people that are going to say yes, who are the people going to answer that phone. Okay, these are the people probably more engaged with stuff. So I found this guy who was a Google local guide in Ushuaia, Argentina. And Ushuaia is the most southern
gateway to Antarctica kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm on Google, on Street View, and I'm checking out the photos, and on Google photo next to the Google Maps, his name keeps popping up. I'm like, okay, this dude is he's a content creator. So I reach out to him. Funnest guy ever. Right. It was just so fun. Like I said, I speak Spanish, so I was able to have a conversation with him. And so we went through Ushuaia. And then I was talking to him, and I was like, isn't this cool? And he looked and he starts laughing. He's like, this is so cool. He's like, I'm here basically at the bottom of the world and you're in Washington, D.C. and we're having this conversation. And it was this moment of it's this complete random stranger that you're able to have this conversation. And much like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
You're in Australia, I'm in D.C. But this conversation I had in Argentina was great.
That's so
cool. And I was like, but in preparation for it, and this is the kind of teacher mindset, and I was like, well, what are we going to talk about? I have to have an agenda, or and you can't just have just banter. And I was like, oh, I'm going to show him photos of Ushuaia that I have questions about. What is this? And it was awesome. First of all, there's this museum in Ushuaia that has, mannequins is not the right word, but three-dimensional statues climbing up the wall.
Okay,
and it's
cool.
And it's a prison break, and there's information in there about prisons. Ushuaia has this huge prison that was kind of like a penal colony. I mean, you're at the bottom of the world, right?
Well, yeah, it's where you send people.
So I'm like, what is this? There's this building and all these people crawling on it on the outside, and it was fun, right? And that's that piece of you get that local knowledge. And then I was like, okay, well, this is fun. And it was fun. It was super, lots of fun.
Cool.
great conversation. That whole moment, at the end of that conversation, he was like, hey, you got to come here. I'll show you all around.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, hey, you come to DC, I'll put you up and we'll go to the town too. And, you know, that's the craziest thing. It's like, we have never met and now we're like friends. Anyway, I'm taking a long time to explain kind of where I'm at. So like, I've evolved this process where I'm like, okay, this is fun. How do I make it even more fun? And then that's where the idea of the game show came up with, because I was like, I've got these great photos that I think have cultural connection to the town. You know, I've done the research, I've read all the blogs, I've looked at all the YouTube videos, and I want to engage with folks differently. And so like Whitehorse Canada was the first episode that I fully produced, but I actually had some test runs with this guy in Ghana, in Ghana. And same thing, like I take a photo, I crop it down, and I show it to him. I'm like, what is this? and first of all, it becomes kind of it's a challenge to them, right? Instead of just being like, tell me about your town, it's like, hey, can you figure this out?
It's like the perfect icebreaker, isn't it? Because like it's taking the pressure off them to figure out what to say or how to describe it, and it becomes a game, and it's a little bit crazy,
fun.
Which is always good.
And it's fun. And the thing about with Wagana was like, there are these little curbs in town that make these interesting shapes. And what it is it's an open air mosque that the shop leaders can actually do their daily prayers and get back to the shop. But it looks like just like these funky curbs that block people's walk, right?
Oh.
And
you don't know if you don't ask, do you?
You don't know if you don't ask. And it was like that thing. And again, I found it on Streetview. So like, that's not going to be in somebody's blog post. Finally, he's like, oh, that's one of these, I think he called it, that's a street mosque. I was like, oh, okay, tell me more about it. And then he tells me the detail with the businesses, right? It's like, oh, if you're a shop owner, you can go do your prayers and come back. And I'm like, okay, that's a cool detail. Like I wouldn't have known that before talking to you about that. So with Whitehorse, I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. So I like was really diligent about getting, you know, a bunch of clues from town, cropping them down to where I thought they were most difficult. And one of my most proud moments was there's a mastodon in Whitehorse, Canada, like it's a statue, right? Obviously it's not real. So it's a woolly mammoth and it's got these giant tusks. And it's on the side of the road. And it's one of those things, again, you're driving down the road on Street View and you're like, what is that? There's just like these two giant woolly mammoths. But I was able to crop the photo down so that the woolly mammoth's tusks look like a letter D. It's like, okay, that's perfect. That's what I want. I want something that really kind of like knocks you off your block a little bit. Like, what are we looking at? How does this work? And I got these great guests and I recorded them separately. So I cropped this woolly mammoth down to the letter D. And I'm feeling really good about this. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a challenge. This is fun. Everybody who's on my show, you know, so Claire, Jordan, and Karen are all just super fun. And we get to this one. And it is perfect, right? It's like chef's kiss because Claire gets it immediately. She's like, oh, it's the Beringia Center. But then Karen and Jordan are like, what is this? And they're like, oh, it's a D. I don't know. And they don't get it. And when I show it to them, they're like, oh my gosh, I should have got that. And that's the fun part where you're kind of like, it's kind of like a metaphor for tourism because the tourist comes to your town and gives you a new perspective on your town. And then that conversation sparks, you're like, oh no, it's this. And then you as a local can break it down and explain it. But it's like the tourist is always asking those naive questions of being like, oh, I don't know it because they don't know any better. And so like I created that situation where I've created this moment for them to see their hometown in a light totally differently.
Chris and I chatted for ages. That's just a taste of some of the cool things he's done with his Streetview Vagabond games and quizzes. And you can check them out. Some of these longer episodes he talks about on YouTube, and he's got quizzes on Instagram. And it's just such a cool idea. So we can, you know, virtually travel anywhere and find out what we want to know. And yeah, his touch of managing to find locals to talk to about them is such a cool way to connect with people. I really loved it. Another great virtual travel idea. So Thank you so much for listening to episode 341 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I hope all of these ideas on virtual travel have sparked your curiosity as well. If you'd like to know more about some of them, then I've got links in the show notes. And for Chiara's experience, for example, to find out to cook along with her nonna or whatever you want to do to learn more about Italian culture, you need to go to experience-assaggio.com. You can also find out more about DayAway, which is Martha's platform, at mydayaway.com, and more about Chris's very cool explorations of the world virtually through Streetview at streetviewvagabond.com. Don't forget, come and join the Facebook group or the LinkedIn group or both for Thoughtful Travellers. We have some great conversations. And sign up for the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter at Substack. You can find that at thoughtfultravel.substack.com. All of these links and more in the show notes, and you can find them at notaballerina.com/341. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.